In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at how we fly a complete circuit. Here we are lined up on the runway of 34 at Sydney. Before we get moving, we're just going to do our final check of our magnetic compass to make sure it's serviceable. We check this on the runway because the runway is our last known magnetic reference since our runways are aligned to magnetic north. So we align our DI 340 to our compass. We've got a heading bug which we've put onto 340. This will help keep us orientated around the circuit. Okay, so we're going to smoothly apply full power. And once we get moving, we're going to check our temperatures and pressures over here to make sure they're in the green. Our airspeeds come alive. You'll notice there's a little bit of a tendency to yaw to the left. That's because of the slipstream, so right rudder will be required to maintain the centre line. At 60 knots, we'll take the weight off the nose wheel with a little bit of back pressure, and the aircraft should become airborne with very little effort. Once we're airborne, we just want to lower the nose just slightly to allow the airspeed to increase and to give us better forward visibility, all the while maintaining our runway heading of 340. So we're at a positive rate of climb, our altimeter is increasing, our temperatures and pressures are still in the green. At 300 feet, we're going to turn our fuel pump off, and we still want to check our fuel flow, make sure we still have pressure. Still climbing at roughly 80 knots, approaching 400 to 450 feet. We're going to anticipate our turn onto crosswind, so we clear right, clear centre, clear left. So if we're all clear, we're going to do a climbing turn onto crosswind using our flight attitude indicator and our directional indicator. So we want a nice rate 1 turn, which is this line here on our attitude indicator. And we're going to put our heading bug onto our right wingtip on our directional indicator. Once we're 90 degrees, now we can look outside the window, and we're going to look to make sure that the runway is where it should be, off to our left. Climbing up to 1,000 feet, we're going to level off. This could happen on crosswind or it could happen on downwind, just depends on the day. When we turn onto 1,000 feet, we'll level off, bring the power back to roughly 2,300, and we'll turn onto downwind. So we clear right, clear centre, clear left. And when we turn, we're going to again focus on our flight attitude indicator and our directional indicator. This time our heading bug will be on the tail of our aircraft, which means we should have a heading of 160, which means we'll then be flying parallel back down the runway. So we'll roll wings level, we'll check our spacing off to our left, and we want our runway to be about 1/3 of the way in from our wingtip. Our height will be 1,000 feet, and our heading should be 160. We can now do our pre-landing checks. So hatches, harnesses are secure. We're going to turn our fuel pump on. Our mixture is going to be rich, and we'll consider taking our flaps, but we will delay that for now until we become abeam our threshold. So once we're abeam our threshold, we'll start reducing our power back to roughly 1,500. And in doing so, we will need a little bit of back pressure to keep us flying level, and that's going to help wash off our airspeed to bring us back into the white arc. Now that we can take our first stage of flap. So we're now looking to be 45 degrees from our threshold for when we turn onto our base leg. So when we turn onto base, we clear right, clear centre, clear left. And we still want to do a nice level turn onto base. The level turn will help wash off our airspeed to help bring us back to 70 knots, which is our target speed for the base leg. This time our heading bug will be on our left wing, and we know we'll be flying 90 degrees to the runway. So when we're descending, our attitude will control our airspeed, and power and flap will control our rate of descent. So if we find that we're a little bit fast, we can reduce the power, and in doing so we will need to raise the nose ever so slightly, because attitude and power gives us our performance. So we're now looking out to the threshold, or to our touchdown point, in on our instruments. So looking for 500 feet roughly on our vertical speed. And ideally looking to turn onto our extended centerline at roughly 6 to 650 feet, with the goal of being established on the extended centerline by 500 feet. If we find that we're getting a little bit low, we can add power, and when we make power changes, we want to keep it to 1 to 200 RPM increments at a time. So now that we're on our extended centerline, we look out to our aiming point, in on our airspeed, back to our touchdown point. As we approach the runway, we're then going to transition our eyes to the very end of the runway, and this is going to help us judge our round out height, which is when we go from our descent to flying parallel over the runway. So now we just do whatever's required to get us to the runway, using small amounts of power if required. So we now transition our eyes to the end of the runway, in on our airspeed, back to the end of the runway. As we cross the threshold, we're going to bring the power back to idle. We're going to fly parallel, and the aircraft, when the aircraft sinks, we will apply a little bit of back pressure, which will help wash off the airspeed, touching down on the main wheels first, and just allowing the nose wheel to settle onto the runway when it's ready. Once all three wheels are on the runway, we'll smoothly apply the brakes to bring the aircraft to a stop. So this is how we fly a complete circuit.